You're listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility.
I'm Esteban.
I'm Jennifer.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 225. Today's podcast is brought to you by 1TDC.com. Dog agility can be hard on your dog's body. Help keep their joints and muscles healthy with 1TDC. 1-tetradecanol complex is a clinically studied blend of unique fatty acid oils that can support your dog's joint health. 1TDC provides healthy inflammatory response from head to tail. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1TDC special offer by purchasing online at BDA1TDC.com. That's BDA, the number 1, TDC.com.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by HitItBoard.com. HitItBoard.com has the innovative training tools you need for agility. Having problems with the dog walker A-frame? The HitItBoard can fix that. Your dog doesn't like tugging? They'll love the Tug It. Can't move your A-frame around by yourself? The Move It can. Go to hititboard.com and use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com.
In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about using ROI to structure your agility training. And before we dive into the topic, I'll just say welcome back to the team. We've been on a bit of a summer break. So this is the first podcast in a month or so. So welcome back, everybody. Everybody ready for the new school year? Not yet.
Ethan starts pre-K this year, so that's fun and exciting. He'll now go all day for 3 days a week. I'm very excited.
That is very exciting.
Excellent. Well, today we're going to go back to school and talk about a mathematical concept, ROI, return on investment, and how that applies to your agility training. So the idea of return on investment is that the technical definition is that it is a performance measure used to evaluate the efficiency of an investment or compare the efficiency of a number of different investments. So the idea is that you are putting something in and you are getting something out. And the more you get out relative to what you put in, the better that is. And the way that I like to apply this to agility most often is an investment of time. So in agility, I would say that we invest time and we invest money, but time is something that you're going to be investing every single day into your dog. And you want to look at what you get out of every minute that you spend training your dog. And so when we think about return on investment, we want to work on things where we get a lot back out of our training. And if you are having a problem on course repeatedly that is costing you qualifying runs, then that is an area where if you could improve that one thing, that one skill, if you could fix your start line, if you could fix your contacts, that would be a very high ROI skill to master because it is costing you every time you enter a trial. And in that case, it's actually costing you money because you're entering trials and you're not getting anything out of those trials when you have kind of these lingering issues. And so I think sometimes we don't always think about those things when we go out to the training field. We want to work on the newest skill or a fun, interesting sequence. And those, we need to do those. We need to build up our entire range of skills. But when we think about ROI, there are other things that might be more important for us to work on in the moment.
I just want to say very quickly that I disagree with you on one point, and that's the idea of you don't get anything unless you're qualifying or you have a clean run or something. I don't think that's true. So you can get a lot out of runs, even if you show up for a weekend and you don't have any qualifying runs. You can get a lot of information about where you're strong and where you're weak and where you need to train, but kind of get a sense of where you're at. And then there's also just the pure enjoyment of being able to compete. I think this happens in other sports. You don't necessarily need to win to enjoy your afternoon tennis with your friend or basketball with friends.
Okay, I absolutely agree with that point. But I do think that there are often people that will be frustrated with the fact that they're not qualifying. And when you look at kind of the body of work, you can pick out some pretty significant gaps that might be affecting that. And I think the kind of larger point there is hit those gaps, and you're going to improve that qualifying rate. And when you're, really looking at things like qualifying for nationals, that has an effect. I think one of the things that I thought of as a high return on investment skill, at least here in the United States, is tunnel discriminations. We see so many tunnel discriminations. We've been working with a lot of new members to our VIP program and looking at their videos, and just time after time we're seeing these tunnel discriminations. And so I think kind of as a group of handlers here in the United States, having a really good answer for tunnel discriminations is a really high return on investment skill to be working on.
Yeah, I think that's true. Then what is a good example of maybe low ROI? So I think for myself, when we would get ready for a lot of these international courses, right, we would work on things that you don't see in most runs, right? You might go 10, 15, 20 runs before you ever saw this kind of challenge. Maybe something like throttle rear cross at one time, and then that became a little more popular, and now it's less popular. So you could spend a lot of time training that skill because, it was a relatively difficult skill to teach, a little time consuming, took a lot of reps. Frequently caused problems with other aspects of your handling until the dog kind of worked it out in their head, right? So it's like a major undertaking. You're teaching a new skill, and for very rare usage, right? Whereas you're saying for tunnel discriminations, it's a very high frequency challenge that people at all levels see, and it's actually a little bit easier to teach than some of the other stuff. And so for myself, knowing that we were trying to prepare to compete at that level, even though the ROI was low there, we still did it, in anticipation of that coming. But let's say that you're not going to compete at that level, or you really have limited time, then yeah, you want to work on the really high yield stuff. You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of cramming for an exam.
Yes.
A little bit, right? And using those cliff notes. Those little yellow books when you haven't actually read the book.
Yeah, it's a good analogy, because why does this matter at all? If you have infinite time, this doesn't matter. You can put in all the time you want on any skill you want if you have infinite time. But we don't have infinite time, and that's why it matters. And the less time you have, the more important the idea of return on investment is. The other thing it made me think about, that I know that we've talked about on the podcast for you specifically, but putting it in this idea of return on investment, is running contacts. You got that benefit every standard run that you run. 50% of your runs, you were getting something out of that running contact training, right? You were getting that edge. We often talk about how Gitchy needed that little extra edge to be competitive with the top dogs, and that's what running contacts gave her. So you're talking about, every standard run.
That's a good one. I want to hear from Jennifer on this, because I know she's been doing a little bit of training, and, she's got a young upcoming dog as well. And she's got very high level dogs that have been competing with stopped contacts. So Jennifer, what are your thoughts on contact training, contact methods compared to the time and energy that you've been investing in it?
That's a very interesting one, a very tricky one I talk about a lot with my students as they come in and they talk to me about the options of stopped contacts versus running contacts. And I think a big part of it for me, I'm in the process of training a puppy. So a young dog, 11, almost a year old, will be a year old this month. And I'm retraining an older dog on the running contacts. And the thing that I will say, comparing the two, is the running dog walk is not hard, but time consuming, just because I don't want to run them into the ground physically. So I'll go out and I'll do some reps, and I might get, 3 minutes in, and then I want to take a break. So you're doing a lot of short sessions throughout the day. But with my young dog, where I'm finding the struggle is there's so many other things I want to be training, and there's so many other things that I need to be working on, right? She's just starting her jump training. We're working really heavily on her verbals. She's learning equipment. So learning the tunnel, learning the tire, learning to do some, bang stuff and bouger board stuff on the teeter. So for her, the running contact, if I spend 5 3-minute sessions throughout the day on that, then I find myself struggling to have the motivation from her and the drive to do the other things. With the older dog, it's a little bit different because a lot of that stuff is already solidified. She's more in what I call kind of a maintenance stage. So I don't need to teach her equipment. I don't need to do jump training. I don't need to do some of the other things that I'm doing with the young one. So I'm finding it a little bit more rewarding, frankly, to do it with the older dog, because I won't spend a week really hard on the running dog walk and feel like I've lost time on so many other skills. Where with my young one, I feel like if I really spend, and this happened to me earlier this summer, I spent a good couple weeks, almost the only thing I was working on was the dog walk. And then I instantly felt behind on everything else. So I will say that in terms of my experience with running versus 2-on-12, the 2-on-12 is so much easier. Let me rephrase that. Not necessarily easier, less time consuming, quicker maybe to train. And therefore, when you have a lot of things to juggle, I find the stop contact to just be a little bit easier. And this is just coming from my personal experience. There might be plenty of other people that have had different experiences. So kind of looking at it from 2 different dogs at 2 different age groups and training levels, it's kind of interesting the difference in my desire, I guess, rather to put the time in and to put that effort in.
That's really interesting, because I think that another idea that we can take, and apply to agility when we're talking about return on investment is that it's a total return on investment. So if we think about, investing money in a stock, the stock might go up, it might go down, it might go up again, it might go down again. And the only thing that really matters is what your return on investment was at the end when you decided to sell the stock and you realize your profit, right? And so even though at some point you might not have gotten that much out of that stock, later, if it goes back up again, you ended up getting a lot. So if we think about our training, if working on something hurts your dog's confidence or hurts your own motivation and desire to train, you just don't enjoy it, or wears out your dog so that they can't do anything else, then you actually kind of have to look at, okay, what does my training week look like? What does my training month look like? And is this investment in training, better or worse over that time period? And so sometimes it's not even about that one single session or that one single skill. It's about what path does this put me on in my training? If I get burnt out, if I train every day, 5 minutes every single day for a week, and then I get so burnt out that I don't go out and train again for a month, then I might have been better off doing less but more consistently. And I think that one other aspect of return on investment that I wanted to touch on is that you can have negative returns on your time in dog agility. And I think it's really important to understand that for people, because sometimes people feel like they really have to get out there. They have to get out there and they have to put in the work. And that is true. But it is absolutely possible to not be in the right frame of mind for training for yourself or for your dog, to not be prepared in that moment to train, either mentally or physically. And you can actually end up behind where you started. You can have a session where you would have been better off not training at all than having that session if it goes, that poorly. And so if you are not feeling well, if you come home and you're already grumpy because of work before you even start training, your dog hasn't done anything wrong and you're already annoyed, that's not the time to go out and train. You can take backward steps. So it is okay to self-evaluate and decide that now is not the right time to train.
I agree with that 100%. And I see that a lot in classes where somebody will come in and, you can almost tell when they walk through the door that, something at work or something's bothering them, something with the family, and they'll leave, and you kind of maybe pull them aside and say, hey, if it's a rough day, it may have actually been worth your time to skip class. What did you really get out? And I actually had recently just a person leave in the middle of class because they recognized that they were real irritable. Stuff with work had been bothering them, and they were not going to gain anything from class. And I agreed with them, and they they just left. And I think that was a smart choice on their part. So I 100% agree about the negative return, especially I see when people try to cram in one last little session or one last little sequence when the dog and the handler are already fatigued, and now you're risking injury. That certainly isn't going to be beneficial. And I'm not sure, I don't think we mentioned it, but it was something we talked about, things like going out and training when it's super duper hot. It's really hot. The temperatures, you're going to be tired. The dog's going to be tired. So you go out, you build the sequence, you run the dog, and you get done with it. And you're like, man, my dog was really slow and I was really slow and that wasn't great. And you just spent an hour doing that. So there's a lot of factors to take into account when looking at ROI.
Yeah, I think one last thing to talk about is how we invest our time, our energy, and our money, frankly, as competitors. I've often heard, I think this is more years ago, but here in the American Kennel Club, there used to be just 2 runs a day, right? You had jumpers and standard. And then USDAA, which was a different organization here in the United States, they had upwards of 4 or 5 runs in a day. So some people felt like that was a better ROI for them, for the amount of time or driving that they had to do. They felt they could get more runs, and more runs is what they wanted. I think, you guys have already done a really great job of talking about how, it's more than just getting out there and doing it or the number of runs. But just this idea of how we portion our very valuable resources as people and as handlers. And you can apply this not only to trials, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the classroom setting, right? Because now we have, well, do I take an online course? Do I take a course in person? Maybe I have, this, let's say I've got $200, right? Do I want to do this on an online class, a couple private lessons, a weekly class, a seminar, a one-time seminar? What do I want to do? Jennifer, what do you think are some things people should think about when they're trying to make this decision?
Well, I think looking at things like how much equipment you have or what equipment you have available is a good thing to look at. If I do not have a lot of equipment, or maybe I only have a couple jumps, no tunnels, no contacts, then taking a class, so traveling into class, doing a 1-hour class every week, it offers you a lot, right? It offers you the time on the contacts that you don't get at home, more space. Maybe your yard's small, so you want to get somewhere that has larger space. So that's going to be something that's going to be super beneficial. But if you have all of the equipment, if you have access to everything in your backyard, you have a space or a field that's 100 by 100, then maybe doing something more as an online class would be more beneficial, because you're looking at a class situation where you have to drive to class and you're one of 6 people. And then you do your 1-hour class, you get your few turns and you drive home, where you could have set that up, downloaded some material, some sequence or course online, set it up and trained multiple dogs even, instead of just that one dog in that one class, trained multiple dogs in the same amount of time. So I think your availability and access to equipment could be a huge one. And then just using your time, kind of in a class setting, are you only paying attention to what the instructor says when it's your turn? Or are you paying attention to what the instructor says for everybody, or at least the dogs that are similar to yours? So really get the most out of your class time, really get the most out of your seminar time by really paying attention throughout that whole time. I see a lot of students that will arrive to a class or seminar. They pay great attention when it's their turn. And then when it's not their turn, they're off doing something else or not paying attention or on their phone, which is really cutting back on what they really could be taking away from that situation.
That's a great point. And the bottom line there, I think, is that return on investment is heavily influenced by you, the trainer, because we have, 2 different handlers. They go to the same seminar. They drive the same distance. They pay the same amount of money. They're spending the same time there, but they're getting 2 completely different experiences out of it. And one person might get a much higher return on all that investment just by doing the things that you've talked about.
All right. Well, we hope this gives you a different way to think about your training, where you're putting your time, where you're putting your money, what skills you're choosing to work on, when you choose to go out to the field and work with your dog. And that kind of different perspective will help you plan that a little bit better. We'd like to thank our sponsors, 1TDC.com, hititboard.com, and NTI Global. End of summer sale, your last chance to take advantage of these super savings. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com for the widest selection of dog agility tunnels for both competition and backyard training. Known for free shipping, more options, high-quality products, and low prices, NTI Global has got you covered. They also offer Tamer and Anchor weight bags along with a full line of accessories and agility storage solutions. Need your agility gear in a hurry? Don't forget to check the in-stock selection. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com and use promo code AUGUSTSALE19 for 5% savings off today. Promo code good through August 31st, 2019. Happy training!